Thank you, Scott, and good evening, everybody. My name is David Fawcett, and we do normally start out with some education, which we're going to do tonight. And once we get through that, please feel free to ask questions about that or about really anything. But the last couple of weeks, I've been really focusing on just taking into account this kind of pandemic that we're all living under right now with very unusual circumstances and a whole lot of stress. And I just know from people in my own life that are having some crises and stress or fear that it's useful to just kind of reach out to them and stay connected. And I thought it might be useful to just go over kind of some of the basic steps of what we call psychological first aid, because I think in many ways, a lot of us can become first responders, if you will, because through our own social networks, whether it's family, friends, kids, parents, people are under a great deal of stress. I think it's useful to kind of know just some of the basics, and a lot of this is common sense, but I think if we hear it, it can start to make sense. So there's a couple steps, 6 steps to be exact, when people do this professionally and in a crisis situation, kind of first responders for mental health. But I think it's something that we can all apply. You know, we're not all therapists, but I think it's useful information. The first is connecting. And I think this is just so important to just make a point of reaching out. I think oftentimes people who are struggling may have some shame about it. They may have some fear. They may not know what to do. They may feel very isolated and not want to burden themselves upon you. So I think just a friendly, unobtrusive way to connect out there, just checking in is a great way to start, just to establish that connection. And then the second thing, once that's done, is, and this can not so much direct questioning, but kind of observation. I would really check out basic needs and just kind of look around. What's the situation there? You know, is there food? Are people having access to whatever kind of needs they have, to medications? Are they running low on something? Do they need some kind of assistance? Because again, when you're in that, when anyone is in that, you kind of get a little cloudy sometimes and don't see things, and it takes really an outside person to kind of maybe bring some affirmative kind of assistance to the situation. So, and this is not just, again, direct questioning, but I kind of just check out people, how you're doing, and I can kind of look around in the background and just kind of get a sense of it. Nobody's going to have great hair these days because we can't get our hair cut, but you know, we should be able to monitor kind of how people are doing. So that's kind of the basic stuff. Then maybe you want to inquire, you know, we talked about food, talked about safety. What about financial needs? What about emotional needs? Just kind of, it's like a status check to kind of see what people are doing. And I think, again, these are such crazy times that are so stressful. Everything is topsy-turvy and disrupted. And I think we can the only thing we can count on is that things are going to be unpredictable for a while. And so I think to really assist people in this weird time of isolation, where we're socially, we want to try to be physically isolated and socially connected. I think that's a much better way than social isolation, because that's not a very healthy state to be in. So if we can be physically connected, physically separated and socially connected. So basically checking emotional needs, resources, and so on. But then the real work starts, I think, and that's listening. I think so often people who are having troubles really just need someone to hear what's going on. And this can be hard for those of us who are kind of rescuers, because we want to jump in and provide solutions and jump into gear, and that may be appropriate. But I think at first we need to really just listen. And there's a couple of ways to do that. One is what we call active listening. And active listening is just a more engaged way of interacting with someone and listening to what they're saying. And it involves different things like open-ended questions, probing questions, you know, maybe follow up with a probing question, paraphrasing what they just said, so that they know that they've been heard and you're connected. Body language, sometimes mirroring body language. If somebody you know, crosses their arms, sometimes you can do that too as the listener, or if someone leans forward, you can lean forward. It's a mirror that really engages and enhances that connection. And then just being attuned to and reflecting feelings, giving them back. So I think that kind of listening is really important. I try to make a habit of, if someone I ask, do you want feedback? Would you like feedback? What would you like? Help solving problems? But I basically ask permission. Sometimes people just want to have their stories told. They don't want you to try to fix it for them. They just need somebody to know what they're going through. And a friendly ear is really helpful. And then I think if it's something that we think we can help with, then I think kind of going to see what we can clarifying a plan, maybe providing some steps, giving some concrete assistance. And remember, when somebody's in crisis, they're not looking for real complicated future planning kind of stuff. They really want to have a solution for the here and now. What are we going to do today? What can we do today or max tomorrow? Just to kind of get an immediate remedy for the situation. And then finally, and by the way, I think assisting, if we can, implementing those plans too, because when people are struggling, they may not have their resources where they can go and actually do what they need to do. They might need help doing that. And finally, I think to really, and this maybe is the big thing we want to infuse through these conversations overall, is to really kind of instill hope where we can. And we obviously want to be realistic, but I think to really sort of point out resilience for people and to help them find their resilience if they're struggling to connect with it. That resilience that maybe they've gone through other tough times in their life, and they can apply some of the lessons learned or things they learned about themselves or the strengths that were revealed at that time to this situation. And really sort of, I used to be as positive as we can about what we can do to have some control over the situation. Because that's really the big deal here, is that this huge, massive thing has kind of descended on us. And there's this sense of just powerlessness and lack of control. And I think it's really important, if we have some control over aspects of our life, it's going to be helpful. And it may be wearing a mask. It may be having groceries ordered, or the pharmacy delivered, or those are the kind of things we can actually do. And I think it's really helpful. It gives people a sense of control over what's going on in their lives when there's a lot of things we can't control. So that's it basically. And those, like as I said, those are maybe common sense, but I think it's important to highlight. I'm just going through them one more time again, to connect. Connect with someone, reach out, connect unobtrusively, look around, use your instinct and your observation. Do things look okay? Do things look not okay? And then maybe ask questions. How are you doing with food? Are you getting your medications? Are you struggling with cash? What are you losing sleep about at night, or what's going well? That kind of thing. Just ask those probing questions. Then the active listening. Open-ended questions, attuned to the person, paraphrasing back, just staying connected. And then if they'd like some feedback, maybe some problem solving, and then finally to kind of be as hopeful and resilient building as we can. So I think those are just kind of basic guidelines these days. I'm making a point personally of reaching out to at least a couple people every day that I might not normally talk to, especially friends of mine who are older, who may be more isolated. I live in Florida. We've already had some incidents, people close to me. So it's around, and I know people that are directly affected by it. And so, and I think one case that is not unusual, but a friend of mine whose partner was whisked away and is now on a ventilator. And of course, he's in isolation. His partner is in the hospital, and they can't talk. And just it's a terrible situation. And my friend who's in isolation at home really needs just people to talk to, because he's spinning. So to be kind, to be there for each other, because that's kind of what we got right now. So yeah, thanks.
Thank you, David. Feel free to ask questions about anything that David talked about, or anything that has to do with addiction and recovery, and use the Q&A feature or the chat feature. I did want to kind of point out, David, before we get into questions, these are steps for handling sort of any crisis, not just coronavirus crisis. I mean, this is how we can help people and be helped by people, all the time, whether it's addiction, whether it's infidelity, or whether it's, about this time last year, I had a friend who was very depressed, and I could tell he was depressed, and I had to observe and ask, and some general questions and then some probing questions, and I finally figured out that he has an airstream and he lives in his airstream, and he was going to have to move. They were closing the RV park where he had lived for like 10 years. Lovely airstream. So and he wasn't doing anything about it, and he had like a month left to find a new place, and I had to sit with him and help him plan because he was just kind of paralyzed with it. And then the day to move, I went over there at like 6 a.m. because we wanted to hook it up and get it moved before traffic. And he hadn't done anything. It wasn't hooked up. There were dishes in the sink. You can't move an airstream with crap all over. So we spent several hours cleaning. He was useless. But once I got him going, he was fine, and but he needed somebody, and I'm seeing a lot of that now. I'll call people on the phone, and they're just sitting there, doing nothing, they're frozen. So yeah, I think this is really good advice. So we've got some stuff here in the chat. Somebody wanted to confirm the steps. So connecting, which is checking in. Basic needs is number 2. Are they being supplied? Do they need any of the basics? Number 3, financial and emotional needs. Number 4, listening, which can be active listening, mirroring, body language, paraphrasing, opening. This is a great summary. And then 5, clarifying a plan, helping them implement the plan, which I think is that's what I was kind of talking about with my friend. I went over there and, I had to help them implement the plan. Instill hope and help them find resilience. I think that's a great summary. Is that on target, David?
Yeah, absolutely, totally.
Okay, so that's in the chat feature, everybody. We can send it to the panelists. I'm going to copy this and send it to everybody in a minute, but we do have a question in the chat feature. So please ask us some questions, send them in about anything. So this one is D-Day was about 2 months ago. That's Discovery Day usually. And as part of our boundary agreement, my husband has given me all of his account info and passwords for everything. That's not unusual. And looking through some accounts today, I found a lot of evidence that he was cheating on his first wife for over a year toward the end of their marriage. It appears to me the same MO as how he acted out during our marriage, using hookup sites, sexting conversations with illicit photos, using an app to communicate with these people that hides his real phone number, etc. My concern is while I knew he cheated on his first wife, he claims it was only one affair, he has failed to mention this longer history of sexting and hookup site use to me. We've already had a full disclosure and have been through the intensive at Seeking Integrity and have started couples therapy. I'm also concerned that he has not mentioned it to his CSAT or other groups. I plan to talk to him about it tonight using the communication method from the intensive. What more insight can you give me about this situation to take into our talk tonight?
That's a lot. Thanks for asking that question, and boy, for all you're doing. I think there's a whole lot of red flags going on in that situation right there. That disclosure, obviously, for those that don't know it, the formal disclosure is a really big deal. That is kind of a coming together of partners and usually therapists representing each partner, and it's a formal disclosure of what's going on, and it is meant to be the entire story without add-ons, not a what we call rolling disclosures, where I'll tell you a little bit today and a little bit tomorrow, and the thing that kind of rolls and extends the trauma for the partner who's on the learning end of all this. So I think there was a lot of obviously stuff sounds like withheld from that disclosure, and I think communication is going to be the key here. What I would suggest is that since you have couples therapy going on, that this is really probably going to be some conversations, meaningful conversations that are going to have to be guided by your therapist here, who can maybe help you confront, help clarify these boundaries and see what's going on. Because this kind of rolling disclosure, or telling half truths or a little bit of the story but not the rest, and giving you access where it seems like it would be obvious to discover this. Maybe there was a desire at some point to be discovered, I don't know. But certainly there's a lack of integrity running through this whole situation on his part. And I think it needs some confrontation, and it needs some clarification, and it may need action on your part in terms of what you want to do about this at this point. Because this, is the exact kind of thing that we don't want to see happen. It's really unacceptable from a partner point of view, that the person is not in recovery when they're doing these kind of games like this. And these patterns typically they repeat themselves too. So I think your suspicions and that evidence are probably well-founded. So I think to be real clear on your expectations, how you're feeling about this, and perhaps not try to get into too much until you get some professional assistance on board. Where you can take it to your couples therapist to really guide the conversation, because sometimes those conversations unassisted can really just kind of spin and not be too productive. And what I don't want to see you have to go through is more of this turmoil than is necessary. And so it may be a really good idea to take it to your couples counselor when you can. So the other thing is to really get clear, and I hope you have your own therapist or counselor in addition to the couples therapist, because I think it'd be very helpful for you right now to have support for you to see, help you formulate your boundaries, your plan of action, and what you're going to do to take care of you in the midst of the situation. Because it may be that you can't count on him to do what has to happen on his part of you, from his part. So I think you really have your support, have your connection in place, your assistance, your team, really to help you in this situation and get clear. Yeah, Scott, Jim.
I just want to point out, I just put in the chat feature, there's a book that just came out a few weeks ago by Stephanie Carnes called Courageous Love. It's a couple's guide to disclosure. And she walks you through the process, you and the addict through, or the cheater through the process of disclosure and everything that should happen in a proper therapeutically supervised disclosure. And it's kind of up to the addict to actually follow the rules and get everything out, including the stuff that happened before he was with you. And it's actually important for the addict to do that so that you can see the addiction and the behavior started before you. It doesn't have anything to do really with you. It really is his problem. I'm using the male as the addict here, but but he may have thought, oh, she only wants to hear about things that happen in this. There's a whole bunch of ways for an addict, and I am one, so I know this, to justify not telling everything. And it kind of defeats the purpose of disclosure, because dribbled out disclosure, Michelle Mays is another therapist she calls it death by paper cut. You just keep getting little pieces and you just bleed to death really slowly. So yeah, I would definitely talk to your couples counselor, and hopefully you have an individual therapist, and again, get very, very clear on everything you want to know. And I'd pick up Steph Carnes' book too and read through it. I think that'll help you organize in your head what you want to know, so you can actually get it all the next time you kind of do this. So great. Yeah, I feel your pain. I think it's rough. So let's see, this one, my husband, this is 22 months from discovery. My husband has not shown any change in his behavior. He's still lying, showing no empathy when I have a bad day, and so on. The last several months, he has started to accuse me of cheating, which has never occurred. I said to him that when he did this in the past, he was the one cheating. Immediately, he goes into a rage and tells me to stop accusing him because he isn't doing anything. This is odd behavior, to say the least. Your thoughts? Thank you both for all you do. Much appreciated. You're welcome.
Yeah, so there is this psychological defense mechanism called projection, where if I'm doing something or if there's something about me that I don't like about myself, I kind of throw it back on you and accuse you of doing it. And it's pretty obvious sometimes when that's going on, but it's a way of kind of deflecting. It's a kind of a last ditch attempt, I think, to deflect and change the subject, if you will, and put people on the defensive. So 22 months from discovery day, you don't say if your husband is going to program or not. I assume he is in some kind of recovery effort. But at 22 months, which is nearly 2 years, we would expect a whole lot of change in the behaviors like this. So I would guess that I would say your husband is not in recovery based on what's going on. I don't know what efforts he's making, but this, it's just a continuation of the same old, and people, addicts, in their cornered state will do all kinds of things, including project and blame and rationalize and make excuses, and it's kind of what we do. I'm also an addict, and that's not something that we include in our recovery skills and tools, for sure. So this is all really, to me, red flag warning signs that things aren't right there. Flying into a rage, I mean, all that stuff is really, really just unacceptable to live with on an ongoing basis. And so again, I hope, and you say it's odd behavior, I think it's, that's a kind word maybe for it. It's just really unexcusable behavior and unsustainable, more to the point, because this just can't go on. It's emblematic to me that there's something very, very wrong there, and that he's not coming clean. So I would really encourage you as well to get your support team in place, get your therapist, see what is going on, and perhaps if your husband would be willing to go to some kind of couples therapist, or at least be in his own therapy and working some kind of program of recovery, because you don't really indicate that he's doing anything except continuing old behavior and kind of acting out, trying to bully his way into getting away with it. So I think, again, that's a case where you need to really do what you need to do for you, and find out what actions you can make and what's going to be good for you and supportive of you, and to put down some boundaries about what's going to be acceptable and what's not. And the thing about boundaries is that we have to really be prepared to follow through. So that's why I really recommend getting in consultation with a therapist or some help on that, setting clear ones that work for you and that you're willing to follow through on, and go from there. Because this, just the kind of situation you're describing after nearly 2 years is just unacceptable.
Yeah, sex addicts, we use our denial to cover up our behavior, and we're lying not only to you, we're lying to ourselves, number one. But there's a lot of ways we do it, and one of the ways is to point the finger elsewhere. This is your fault. If you didn't behave that way, I wouldn't need it. Or we say, well, no, it's not me who's cheating, it's you. You're crazy. I just put some links to gaslighting in the chat feature, an article by me and a couple by Kristen Snowden. It's really common behavior for cheaters and sex addicts to engage in gaslighting with their partner, and to accusatory behaviors, whether it reaches the level of gaslighting or not. This is not uncommon, but at 22 months in, it should not be happening. I was on a session this morning, and a guy said he had slipped on Sunday, and he's supposed to tell his wife within 24 hours, and he hadn't done it until last night. And she finally said, "You're being overly attentive and overly nice. I know you slipped. Why don't you tell me about it?" That was his way of covering it up. I'll be overly attentive and overly nice, and she'll think everything is wonderful. Well, she recognized the behavior, and she was right, and she called him on it, and he was, glad, and he was sharing about it. But, we're all over the place with our behavior when we don't want you to find out what we just did. So I'm not saying he did anything, but you know, I would be wondering too. So next question here. It has been impressed on me more and more in drop-in groups that I am likely more than just mildly depressed. I really am against doctors and medications for depressions for many reasons, including lack of income and lack of insurance. I don't drink, I eat well, I try to walk most days. I'm going to try taking SAME, I don't know if that's an acronym for something. Maybe David, you can help. Are there other things I can do? I know, gratitude lists. So thank you, you've been listening to us. Gratitude lists are great. I have a hard time being consistent. Have you found that affirmations help with depression?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I don't know what SAM is offhand. So, you know, depression, it's a funny thing because it takes many forms. Some people experience, you know, too much sleep. Some people can't sleep at all. Some people have a huge appetite. Some people lose their appetite. It just has all these different forms. And therefore, it can be kind of hard to diagnose sometimes. I think, though, the way you're describing yourself, it might be something to investigate. There is a brief depression checklist called the Beck Depression Inventory, BDI, that's available online. I think it's 20 or 24 questions, and you can kind of just do that real quickly. And it's a nice screening tool to see, you know, just kind of get a sense of where you line up and just give you some objective evidence of what your score might be, which might be helpful. But depression, I think, there's a couple different things that can be going on. Someone can be what we call endogenously depressed, which means they're kind of just depressive by nature, and they have a tendency to go a little lower in their moods than most people and stay there a little bit longer, and it can affect kind of their everything from their thinking to their physical activity to their overall health. Other times we have what we could call a reactive depression, where things, you know, we lose our job, we lose our partner, or someone dies in the family, or that kind of thing, and it kind of spins us down into a hole of sorts. So, you know, kind of depending on what's going on, there are different solutions and different things to be done with it. You know, I understand your concern about depression. I mean, medications for depression. Some do work really well. Interestingly, the most effective combination seems to be a combination of psychotherapy and medication combined. The meds that are most commonly prescribed these days are called SSRIs, which are very safe and often very, very inexpensive, or generically available, I'll put it that way. Medications that even a general doctor can prescribe. You don't necessarily need to go to a psychiatrist. So all that said, it'd be important, I think, to talk to your doctor about it. You might take that BDI screening test and see what it shows. But I think it's important, probably if you're noticing this and if you're getting that feedback from the world that there may be something going on, you might be a whole lot better and more comfortable if you got it checked out. I know that may be challenging sometimes depending on the circumstances. Now, what can you do about it yourself? A couple different things. I think, for one thing, routines really help. So if you kind of get up at the same time every day, go to bed at the same time every day, eat 3 meals a day, you know, kind of have routine. So our bodies kind of naturally fall into this rhythm. One of the hallmarks of kind of depression or anxiety is that people's lifestyle gets all mixed up and they're going to bed at weird hours and sleeping too late, and they kind of get out of sync with the world. And just that simple act of kind of regulating and falling into line with the regular pattern can really be helpful. Affirmations, I'm a big fan of affirmations, as everyone knows on this webinar, and I think they do help. In terms of an affirmation, of course, is an I statement, I am, and something that's empowering, something that's positive, something that's powerful, that we can kind of internalize. The problem with that is that an affirmation is not as powerful against a real severe depression as it needs to be. And so can it help? Yes. Can it help you feel better? Yes. But depending on the nature of your depression, you may need something stronger, basically. And so, depression, it's tricky. It can be really helped in a great way by different kinds of treatments. So I'd really encourage you to kind of check out what options there are, because it may be something that you can't do on your own by taking these steps we've talked about, routines and affirmations and that kind of thing. They'll help. I guarantee they'll help, but it may need more.
Yeah, I want to point out a couple things. Number one, this question came from a male. I'm not going to give a name, but this question came from a male. Males do have depression. People think we don't. We do. I have depression. I'm getting in the comments or in the chat feature. SAM-E is a natural supplement that has some antidepressant properties. Okay. Thank you. I had no idea.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would definitely talk to a doctor. I think the world is over medicated, but I take an antidepressant every day because it works for me. And when I have gone off them, I get depressed again. I go back on them. I'm not depressed. So that's my personal testimony, and that's coming from somebody who really, really, really thinks 90% of the prescribed medications in this world are completely unnecessary. My personal opinion. Feel free to disagree. But I think David's kind of on the same wavelength as me with meds.
Yeah, I'm not a big pill pusher, but I have seen it just do miraculous things in people's lives when it's when it's appropriate.
Yes.
I will say with the supplements, just be cautious, because if you're on other medications, there's a lot of interaction between antidepressant supplements like that and certain medications. So be cautious about that, because they might interact in a negative way.
Okay, next one here. We are a military family, and we both go to individual therapy as well as couples therapy through the behavioral health department. We don't believe anybody there is a CSAT. Would it be okay if we do full disclosure with the counselors on base? Thoughts?
Yeah, great question. In my experience, first of all, a great deal of the counseling services in the armed forces are really, really excellent. The VA does amazing mental health counseling. I have a number of colleagues who I know are therapists for families and other things with the military, and they do a really great job. My only concern about what you say is that the whole disclosure process is a really specialized protocol. And I think it really requires some specialized training in terms of how to do it. And it's just something that not every therapist can do. And that's true, by the way, I think just for a lot of these issues in general, sex addiction and addiction even, it does require some specialized training. And a single therapist can't do everything. And we've at Seeking Integrity have seen a lot of clients who've been kind of hurt by therapists who didn't know what they were doing. And I've seen that in my years too over practice. I get a lot of clients who are basically harmed by well-meaning therapists who didn't quite know what to do. So I think the disclosure piece is a really vital step. And I don't know if there'd be the option of having like a disclosure CSAT that you could employ for a couple sessions or planning sessions to do it and execute it, and who could work in collaboration with your existing therapists. But I would be hesitant, I'm a sex therapist, not necessarily CSAT, and I don't consider myself, with my sex therapist training, without the CSAT training I've had, able to do that. And so I think it's really an important credential to look for. So I know it's extra, it's probably out of your network or whatever, but you might want to try to find somebody just for that piece of it and have them collaborate with your existing therapist to build it in. Just because I think you could really, there's the potential to do harm, which I'd hate to see happen.
Yeah, absolutely. Get a CSAT for disclosure, please, please, please get a CSAT for disclosure, and make your individual therapists read the book that I put in the chat feature earlier. So at least they'll have a clue about what to expect. And yeah, cough up for the CSAT, if only for disclosure, because bad disclosure can kill a relationship. And clearly you're trying to save your relationship.
Right. Right. Exactly.
What are your thoughts about the unfaithful spouse telling the betrayed spouse they don't trust them based on the unfaithful behavior? He has also told me that when I talk to a friend of mine of the opposite sex, which I've had a friendship with for over 40 years, that I should not talk to him because it makes him uncomfortable. To me, that's unacceptable for me to give up healthy friendships. So this is a question, let's say I cheated on David, and I'm telling David I don't want him to talk to somebody that he, let's say David's a woman for a second. I cheated on David and I don't want Davidina, to talk to any man, even a man that she's been friends with for 40 years, because I know I've cheated and I'm projecting onto Davidina. I think that's the question.
Right.
Or the situation. Sorry, I think I made it worse.
No, I think you got it. No, I think this is that same projection thing we were talking about before, where kind of muddy the waters and blame you before you can blame me, and it's just indicative of just really unhealthy patterns in the relationship in terms of blame and distrust and manipulating and frankly bullying. And I think whenever I see kind of somebody not wanting to control their partner and their partner's social life, I worry, frankly, because that's on a continuum, and that taken up to extreme, we get into areas of domestic violence and even worse. So I think, and not saying that's the case here, but it's the lower end of that same continuum of bullying, controlling, kind of have your way by shutting down the situation. So you have a right to be friends with whoever you want. You have a right to live your life the way you want. You have a right to be treated with integrity and respect. And so again, I think boundaries, that's a boundary that you probably need to talk about and set down, and that those control issues to me are real red flags, that there's something really wrong there. And so yeah, I think it's more of the same stuff, that projecting, controlling, kind of blustering, bullying, blaming, all is a way to deflect. Scott mentioned earlier the different strategy to being overly nice and being kind, but to the same purpose, right? To kind of take to lose the trail there. So, but I think, this is again, unacceptable behavior, that just, you sound pretty frustrated with it. And I think you need to kind of get your support systems in place and see what you need to do.
Somebody just chatted that the book I've been recommending is on pre-order, but I did check the date. It's coming out a week from today. So you can pre-order it and get it in a week.
Okay.
And I just want to add to David's answer there, addicts, the underlying issue that addicts have, addiction is an intimacy disorder. We have this fear of true connection, and we try to control and manipulate, and we don't trust. And, that may be cropping up right now. Even though you've never cheated, the fact that, he just doesn't trust other people enough to believe that you've never cheated. And he's going to have to do some internal work maybe to come around to that. Or he's just in denial still, covering up and projecting. So, my wife and our couples counselor have suggested an in-house separation, which I've agreed to. It has left me feeling very alone and defeated. The separation was put forth as a recharge for both of us, but seems to be having the opposite effect on me. What can you suggest to get me out of this feeling?
Right. So in-house separations can be a really useful technique to really kind of buy time for the couple to break up the dysfunctional patterns, kind of just stop the cycles from repeating themselves, and to really buy time, and to buy time so that each person can kind of do some healing and get clear and do some work on themselves. And I don't know the circumstances. I would recommend it, for example, if there's kids in the house and there wasn't an extreme problem, and you kind of, the family unit is still there, but something's different, and that there's this boundary has been set. You guys are kind of separated for now, but the point is not punishment. It's not to just bring everything to a stop. The point is to kind of buy time, and so to buy time to do work, and it can leave you, of course, feeling alone and separated. It's a very, can be a drastic thing, right, to separate like that. But it's meant to really save the marriage. And so I think the discomfort you're going through now is something that ultimately would be superior to the pain of a divorce and actual true separation and real a breakup of the couple. What I would do, though, since this is your time and it's her time, is to really make use of it. And I hope you're getting therapy during this time and support, because really what's important right now is for you to concentrate on what feelings are you feeling, why are you feeling them, how does this relate to your behavior, how does it relate to your relationship with your wife. And just, it's really, it's like a little way to separate yourself just enough to try to get some insight on things. And so obviously, feeling alone is going to be a natural feeling, but I hope what you need, you're not just kind of sitting in isolation. I hope you're kind of using the time to connect with a therapist, some professional person, and as well as some of your recovery groups, including your support system, and get feedback on what's going on. Because that's the whole point, is to really buy time for you to explore and learn and grow. And the same thing for your wife. So I guess I would make sure you're connected in a way that with your support system and getting that kind of support. If, I don't know if this is the case, but I've seen this before where instead of kind of using this trial separation in-house, instead of kind of looking outward and getting connection and getting help, if the person just kind of sits there and feels lonely because they're still trying to stay just connected with their partner but can't, there's this kind of weird dynamic where they're feeling lonely and disconnected. And of course you're going to be lonely and disconnected to some extent, but I think the point is to make the time to really reinforce healthy, supportive connections with people outside so you can do some growing during the time. I do hope you have a therapist to guide you through this, because it's one thing to suggest this, but that really requires some follow-up on the part of the professional who's kind of guiding you through the point of this and through the feelings that you're experiencing as you're going through this. That'll make it a much more worthwhile experience if you have that guidance as you progress through this.
Yeah, I mean, what I'm reading into this question is that your sole support in life for, since you got married has been your wife. You're probably like most men in the Western world. You don't have any friends. You have a wife or partner and work colleagues. And work colleagues are not really the people you can turn to when you need support. So this is your chance to find some other recovering men who understand what you're going through and understand what you're feeling, and reach out to them and get your support there. And, while you're getting a handle on your addiction and what sobriety is going to look like, and, breaking through denial and getting honest with yourself and all that other work, I think it's just as important to build a real network of support with other recovering men, or at least other men.
Right. And I would say, I'd make a distinction, as you just did, Scott, between kind of our personal friends and our recovery friends. I think we need people in recovery meetings who are maybe perhaps more objective about what they see with us than, your good buddy who's going to kind of support you, or maybe not point out bad things, or not be as objective as somebody. We can be friendly with, of course, we have friends in the program, but I think I also count on them and trust my friends in program to be really straight with me in a way that a good friend might not be. And I also might not want to burden my close personal friend with stuff that's going on with me, like I would share with my meeting friends. So yeah, outside support's important.
Yeah, I completely agree. This next question comes from a male who was questioning his gay or bisexual sexual orientation in addition to sexual compulsivity. So I'm going to assume this is happening at the gym, which is where a lot of gay men sometimes do their sexual acting out. He wants to know, is checking somebody out through the bathroom window several times, even though I promised myself I would keep myself from doing that, considered sexually compulsive behavior? How about opening the bathroom door? I'm gonna guess this is like a shower door, shower stalls. When the man is taking a shower and making an excuse as to why I went in, is that sexually compulsive behavior as well?
Okay, so yes, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It might also be sexually offending behavior to.
Right. I was going to.
Yeah.
Make
I mean, just throwing that out there.
You know, it's really tricky territory there, and I think, well, it's inappropriate, obviously, but I think it's really something to look at because it can be offensive, it can be assaultive to certain people, and it can get you in a lot of trouble. Not just from losing a gym membership, but to getting arrested as well if people take offense to it. There are certain areas where people do kind of play these games. I'm a gay man. I think that this happens, but any sex addict or someone who has an issue or think they might have an issue with that really needs to be careful, because this is that kind of sneaky, illicit behavior that is emblematic of certain kinds of voyeurism and other kinds of problems that get people in a lot of trouble. So I think it's a thing to really avoid, to maybe get clear on what's going on with that. What's the impulse there? If you have concerns about sexual orientation, I'd talk to somebody about them and see what's going on with that. But this will get you in trouble. And in my experience, this can escalate too. It starts out with a certain kind of behavior and kind of can expand. And so just really big red flags here that you need to kind of talk about this with a therapist and see what's going on. And I don't mean to say that if you have gay inclinations, you need to talk to a therapist, because that's there's nothing wrong with that inherently, but this behavior is not appropriate. And it really needs, I think, to get some clarification just for your comfort level too. What's going on here, just to see what's happening.
Yeah, we got some clarification here. This is happening at home, so I'm assuming roommates, and they've already talked to him about it. So it's clear they kind of consider it offending behavior as well. I mean, think about if you were a straight man and had a female roommate and did that to her. I mean, she could call the police. And just because it's a guy you're doing it to doesn't mean he couldn't call the police. And the fact that you can't stop yourself, even though you tell yourself you won't do it, there's an element of sexual compulsivity. I also want to add that being gay or bisexual has nothing to do with being a sex addict. Completely unrelated issues, so yeah, being gay doesn't make you a sex addict any more than being straight makes you a sex addict. Just want to be very, very clear about that. Right. How can an addict say, I have been like this my whole life, and expect me to believe they can stop watching porn and acting out on a dime, but can't stop lying, blaming, accusing, denying, and so on after 22 months? That's a follow-up.
Right. So, again, 22 months of not recovery there, I think. And, addicts, and I'm an addict in recovery, we rationalize, we blame, we deflect, we make up stories, and I guess some days I believed it, some days I didn't, but I think it just is stuff that addicts do when they're in their disease. And I think this shows me this person is really deep in their disease right now and is acting it out. And this, by the way, can happen also. I've seen, even when people do stop their acting out, if they don't move into recovery, they can still be a lot of lying, manipulating, anger, and just kind of not necessarily to cover their behavior, but because they're not in recovery. I think I know people, Scott and I have talked about this before, who are in different fellowships, 20 years, celebrating 20 years of sobriety, but they're the angriest person you've ever met. They've not really worked a program. And so I think there's grades of distinction. People can maybe be technically clean and sober, and I don't think this person sounds like he is, but still be have a lot of those personality defects on full display. So, I think a lot of this is just kind of rationalizing and, saying they can do it, but really they're not able to. So again, I think boundaries and expectations and getting some support in terms of how to deal with the situation, because you're living with an active addict, it sounds like to me. And really
yeah, stopping the behavior is step one in the long process of recovery. You also have to stop lying and blaming, and the work is done between the ears once we stop the behavior. So even if he really has stopped watching porn and acting out, he's still behaving like an addict, and needs to do some work.
I think that goes, Scott mentioned earlier this idea of an intimacy disorder, right? So we can stop her acting out, but there's still a lot of dysfunction in the relationship with that person and how he relates to you. And that, I think those are all kind of defenses against vulnerability and trust that at a deep level on his part that he probably isn't even aware of. And he's just defending against uncomfortable feelings. So yeah, it's going to take some work and commitment. And I think, the willingness to take action on his part. And that ironically maybe assisted by your setting clear boundaries, that this won't work anymore. It's not working.
I love this next question. Hello, I think I'm overdoing it on Zoom recovery meetings, 3 to 4 a day. It's starting to feel like I'm avoiding focusing on things I should and want to be focusing on, my to-do list and such. I love the meetings, but I'm feeling a little drained. I'm sure watching the news isn't helping either. Yeah, turn off the TV. I notice I'm reaching out less to my fellows. Thoughts? The to-do list he adds, or she or he, but I don't want to give anything away, includes looking for a job, investigating government resources, etc. So yeah, it's a vital to-do list.
Okay, yeah, and I know this person. I'm always happy to see this person on meetings, but I think 3 to 4 times a day, maybe a little bit of avoidance behavior there. And it comes to mind that old expression, meetings are a bridge back to life, right? And I think it is easy to kind of get caught up in the 12-step process, and there are worse places to be for sure, but I think it's important to remember that these are places where we kind of get recharged and get our tools and get support and then go back out there and do our thing. So it sounds like you kind of know the answer to the question already. You've said 3 or 4 is kind of excessive, but it's like too much of a good thing, right? I guess, but I think I'd be cautious about it. It sounds like you have a clear list of stuff you need to do and want to do. And so it might just take some self-discipline, saying, okay, 1 meeting a day is going to do it for me, and make that human contact. To me too, the meetings, they're comfortable, they're non-threatening, they're supportive, they're good for me, but they're also, I can really avoid life in these meetings. And that is particularly true right now when we have to kind of engage in all our life, all our activities through the computer. And so it's kind of weird because we're doing the same thing, but sitting in meetings all the time, while it's worse than some other things, I think it's probably a good idea to find some balance there. Balance, at least in my life, is always hard. I always tend to be on the road too much, or home too much, or working too much, or just finding balance is hard. It sounds like this may be just one of those things where you have to kind of manipulate your balance a little bit and get back to some priorities. What you might find that we were talking earlier about daily routines, a daily routine might be really helpful for you now, where you can, if you have things you need to do, to set aside a certain amount of time, a couple hours in the morning to do this, or a couple hours in the afternoon to do that, and a meeting at night, or however you want to work it. But those routines can really start to add some structure that's helpful.
Yeah, and I mean, in usually alcohol recovery and drug addiction recovery, sometimes people who are very new do need 3 or 4 meetings a day. They're unemployed, they're unemployable, they can barely think straight. They just need to get sober, and 3 or 4 meetings a day is what they need to do for a couple of months. It sounds like you're a little further along and a little more grounded. So yeah, I mean, I got into recovery so I could have a life, not so recovery could be my life. And so yeah, David hit the word balance. There's definitely some balance issues there to play with and look at. But thank you for coming to, for populating the online meetings. That's great.
Right.
Appreciate that. We are out of time here. So David, do you want to wrap us up with a little recap and take us out?
Yeah, thanks, Scott, and thanks everybody for a great session tonight. And the questions and the turnout have been terrific. What we started out talking about tonight was just this kind of psychological first aid steps that we can all take to help each other and be kind to each other right now. With us, when Scott put them in the chat if you came in late, but to connect with each other, to kind of check out unobtrusively, looking for basic needs, meds, food, money, security, that kind of thing, and then really starting to do more active listening and this is, people need to talk in my experience, and to really just be a good listener with whatever that takes, paraphrasing, open-ended questions and so on. And then do some comfort if we can, some identifying a plan if the person wants our response and wants our help, to sort of do what we can to problem solve right here in the here and now. What can we do today? What needs to be done today, tomorrow, right? Very much in the present. And then sometimes, and when people are under stress, it's sometimes harder to take suggestions and run with it, or they may have limited resources or opportunities or capabilities right now. So to really maybe help them implement suggestions as well, to actually help them follow through. And then finally, to be as hopeful and help them build resilience as to the greatest extent possible.
Thank you, David. Thank you, everybody, for joining us tonight. We will be back next week, same time, same place. We hope to see you.
Great. Thank you, Scott. Thanks, everyone.
Good night, everybody.